In this video, I'll tell you the transformative journey of Will Hunting as he grapples with his past, discovers his true potential, and learns to love and be loved. Good Will Hunting, a powerful tale of overcoming adversity and chasing your dreams. Before we dive into the exciting story, please subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories. Will Hunting sits at home, engrossed in a book when his close friend Chucky Sullivan arrives to pick him up. The two head to MIT, where Professor Gerald has assigned his students a theorem to solve by the end of the semester. He promises of having their accomplishment published in the MIT newspaper for whoever solves it. As a janitor at the university, Will is mopping the floor in the hallway when he glances at the theorem written on the board. He watches as the students leave, and then takes a closer look at the theorem, wondering if he might be able to solve it. Will and Chucky head to a bar for the evening. However, Will decides to leave early and head back home to work on the theorem he saw earlier that day at MIT. The next day, as he goes about his cleaning duties, Will continues to work on solving the theorem, writing his calculations on the board in the hallway. Later, Will and Chucky are playing a game of baseball, with Will complaining that Chucky is crowding the plate as he keeps hitting him with the ball. Chucky mentions plans to go to a Harvard bar the following week, and Will seems to agree. Meanwhile, Professor Gerald is attending an MIT alumni reunion. His students come to Professor Gerald's class asking about the person who solved the theorem. Surprised to see the solution written on the board, Gerald asks his students if any of them solved it, but no one comes forward. Meanwhile, Will, Chucky, Morgan, and Billy are attending a baseball game. Will recognizes one of the attendees as his childhood bully and decides to leave the game early with his friends. While driving, they see the bully causing trouble again and decide to confront him. A fight ensues, and the police arrive to arrest Will. When Gerald enters his class the next day, he notices an unusual number of students present, all curious about the person who solved the theorem. He asks for the mysterious person to reveal themselves, but no one speaks up. Later, while Will is working on a problem on the board, Gerald spots him and reprimands him for graffiti. Will quickly walks away, but Gerald later looks at the board and realizes that Will is a genius. As planned, Will heads to the Harvard bar with his friends. Morgan teases him for getting fired from his job as a janitor at MIT. Chucky flirts with two Harvard students and lies about having a history class with one of them. However, a man named Clark shows up and begins to insult Chucky, showing off his own knowledge of history and belittling Chucky for his lack of it. Will jumps into the conversation, using his intelligence to outsmart Clark and call him out for plagiarizing his remarks on history and being unoriginal. Clark is left feeling embarrassed and tries to insult Will in return, but Will handles the situation well and Clark backs off. Later, Skylar, one of the girls Chucky was flirting with, approaches Will and shows interest in him, giving him her number and suggesting they go out sometime. Meanwhile, Professor Gerald visits the Buildings and Grounds office at MIT in search of Will, but he is told that Will didn't come to work that day. They mention that they could contact Will's parole officer, as Will got his job at the university through him. Later, Will is in court, explaining his actions of hitting a cop. The judge mentions Will's record of misconduct and mentions that Will lived in different foster homes, being removed from 3 of them due to severe physical abuse. Will's charges are not dismissed and his bail money is set at $50,000. From jail, he calls Skylar and checks in with her, asking if they can hang out soon. He is then taken to meet Professor Gerald, who offers to help him out on the condition that Will agree to work more on math and also see a therapist. Will initially takes the therapy aspect lightly. Despite his struggles, Will continues to work on math with Gerald and the two seem to have a good time together. Frustrated with Will's lack of progress in therapy, Gerald decides to have Will meet with Dr. Sean McGuire, his old college roommate who is now a therapist. Gerald visits Sean at work and the two catch up. Meanwhile, Will tells Chucky about his probation and counseling arrangement. Gerald convinces Sean to take on Will as a patient, arguing that Will is exceptionally intelligent and worth a shot. He also mentions their shared background from South Boston. During his first session with Sean, Will behaves casually and discusses books and exercise, displaying a sense of conceit. He starts talking about a painting in Sean's office and makes assumptions and derogatory comments about Sean's wife, causing Sean to react seriously and remind Will of the boundaries of their conversation. After Will leaves, Gerald expresses concern to Sean about whether he wants to continue seeing Will as a patient, but Sean is willing to continue and schedules another session for the following week. That night, Sean stays up, lost in thought as he reflects on Will's remarks about his painting. Meanwhile, Will and Skylar spend time together, with Skylar discussing her elite background and plans to study medicine at Stanford after graduating. The two enjoy each other's company and have a good time. At their next session, Sean takes Will outside to visit the lake and tells him that he thought about Will's comments on his painting and stayed up all night, coming to the realization that Will is just a kid and doesn't really know what he's talking about. He points out that Will has never been outside of Boston and therefore couldn't truly understand the sensory experiences of visiting the Sistine Chapel or knowing what it's like to feel truly content in someone's presence. Sean also mentions that Will wouldn't know the first thing about experiencing war. He doesn't truly know about love or loss because he hasn't experienced either of them. He also mentions his wife's death from cancer and reveals that he doesn't see Will as a confident man, but rather as a scared kid trying to act tough. Sean explains that Will presumptuously assumed everything about his life by looking at a painting and notes that he can't understand Will's life by simply reading a book like Oliver Twist. He can only understand Will if he is willing to open up and talk about his experiences, but sees that Will is too scared to do so. Sean leaves and everything begins to sink in for Will. That evening, he calls Skylar from a payphone while it's raining heavily, but he doesn't say anything and ends the call. In his next therapy session with Sean, Will remains quiet throughout and leaves when the session is over. Sean realizes that Will won't talk unless he wants to. Sometime later, Will is working on solving mathematical problems and impresses Professor Gerald by outsmarting a learned man with his answers. Finally, Will starts to open up to Sean, cracking a joke and proudly discussing a recent date he went on. He admits to not really checking in with Skylar again, and Sean calls him an amateur for his approach. Will insists that he knows what he's doing and that Skylar is different from other women he has been with, but Sean advises him to call her. Will resists, saying he doesn't want to ruin what he has by getting to know her more because he believes their relationship will become dull and boring. Sean mockingly points out that Will's approach will lead him to never really know anyone in life, and shares memories of his own wife's little habits that only he knew about. He explains that these trivial memories are what truly matter and that people choose who they let into their worlds. Sean reminds Will that he isn't perfect and neither is Skylar, but they just have to figure out if they are perfect for each other. The only way to find out is by giving it a shot. Will asks Sean if he has ever thought about getting remarried, but Sean shows his loyalty to his deceased wife. Will uses Sean's own words against him, saying that he will get through life never really knowing anyone. Will goes to visit Skylar and apologizes for ghosting her, asking if they can go out again. Skylar tells him that she is busy with university work, specifically assigning the proton spectrum to ibogamine. However, Will quickly returns with the answer to her assignment, saying he couldn't wait to spend time with her. They attend a dog race together, where Skylar's dog takes part and ends up winning. During the race, Skylar learns that Will grew up in South Boston and asks him about his experiences there and his siblings. Will tells her that he has 12 big brothers and Skylar expresses a desire to meet them. Will then asks Sean if he regrets meeting his wife, to which Sean denies and says that there are pros and cons to everything. Will asks when Sean knew his wife was the one for him, and Sean quotes a specific date, showing how well he remembers everything. He explains that they met at a baseball game, but admits that he wasn't even there to watch the whole game because he was spending time with his future wife. Will mockingly points out that Sean missed out on such an important event. Will and Skylar spend more time together and share intimacy. She asks him when he will show her his place and introduce her to his friends and brothers. Will agrees to take her to meet them. Chucky, Billy, and Morgan meet up with Will and Skylar, telling each other funny stories and conversing, but Will still seems hesitant to show Skylar his personal life. Chucky playfully taunts Will, saying that if Skylar saw his living conditions, he would be dropped like a bad habit. Despite this, Will manages to persuade Chucky to give him his car keys. Professor Gerald meets with Sean to talk about Will and mentions that he has been getting lots of job offers that fit Will's potential. Sean doesn't think Will is ready yet, and the conversation becomes heated as a conflict arises. Sean wants Will to figure out what he wants to do in life on his own, while Gerald wants him to pursue mathematics. Gerald reveals that he sent Will to attend a job meeting, but Will instead sends Chucky, who behaves casually and leaves the people of the company confused. Skylar asks Will if he has a photographic memory, considering his intelligence, and how he finds something as difficult as organic chemistry so easy, despite studying it only for fun. Will explains that he is just naturally good at studies. They become affectionate with each other. Later, Skylar expresses her wish for Will to come with her to California, which leads to a serious conversation about Will's fear of abandonment. He becomes angry and tells her about his traumatic past as an abused orphan, revealing that he lied about having brothers. Skylar tells him she loves him, but he says he doesn't love her, causing her to be heartbroken. Tom reminds Will of how grateful he should be to Professor Gerald for working so hard with him. The situation becomes tense when Gerald asks him about the job meeting, and Will admits that he had a date and sent Chucky instead, which doesn't please Gerald. Will says he doesn't want to spend his life explaining things to people and brags about how easy the proof is for him, while Gerald struggles to solve it. Eventually, Gerald admits that Will has more potential than him and sadly burns the proof. Will attends a job meeting for the National Security Agency and gives a witty and detailed explanation for why he wouldn't work for them. During a therapy session with Sean, he asks Will if he has a soulmate, and Will denies having one. The conversation becomes heated when Will becomes defensive about how low-paying jobs are not considered honorable. Sean believes that there is honor in all types of work and tries to delve deeper by asking Will about what he actually wants to do in life. Unfortunately, Will becomes impractical and unrealistic in his responses, causing Sean to ultimately ask him to leave as he will not tolerate such foolishness. Will and Skylar have a bittersweet phone call as she prepares to leave for California. While she tells Will that she loves him, he doesn't say anything in response. As Skylar boards her flight, Will sits alone on a bench. Meanwhile, Gerald is frustrated with Will for not showing up for his session with Sean. Will and Chucky are at a construction site, where Chucky helps Will realize that he is throwing away his potential and being ungrateful for the intelligence he has been blessed with. Sean and Gerald have a heated argument about Will, with Sean defending him by saying that Will has suffered from a fear of abandonment throughout his life and is emotionally scarred. Gerald wants Will to focus on mathematics, but Sean becomes angry and the two men angrily confront each other about their past faults. Will walks in during their argument, and Gerald leaves. Sean tells Will that he is going to send his file to the judge for evaluation. The two men also discuss their experiences with physical abuse, and Will admits that he broke up with Skylar. Sean helps Will understand that none of the abuse he suffered was his fault, and Will breaks down in tears and hugs Sean. After their session, Will rides the bus alone and spends time thinking. He later meets Sean for their final session, during which he mentions that he has gotten a new job thanks to an opportunity provided by Gerald. Sean gives Will his number, and they hug. Will turns 21 and his friends surprise him by showing him a car they built for him. Gerald visits Sean and they both apologize to each other, resolving their past conflicts. As Will drives to Sean's place, he leaves a note behind. Chucky and the guys visit Will's place to pick him up, but find that he is gone. Chucky is happy that Will has finally stepped out of his comfort zone. Sean reads the note and finds out that Will has ditched the job and gone to see Skylar, which makes him happy. Will begins his life-affirming drive to California to start over with Skylar and embrace an unpredictable future. The end. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this.